they've explained for years that Joe Biden is a gaffe machine, that he stammers, that he gets names wrong, but he gets the big picture right. But this kind of report is just so saying the quiet part out loud about what voters can see for themselves, that this guy is 81 years old. And if they elect him in November 2024, he'll be nearly 82 and he'll be 86 by the time he ends a second term in office. Democrats are saying this feels like a drive-by shooting. I mean, it was supposed to be a report into whether or not he'd done anything wrong by keeping classified documents, which, by the way, he left all over his garage next to a dog crate and God knows where. That was also in the report. But just the casual brutality with which the special counsel said you couldn't put Joe Biden on the stand in court because jurors would just view him as a sort of sympathetic, doddery old man with a poor memory. It's just devastating. I mean, if he's not fit to stand in front of a jury on a witness, I mean, how on earth can he be leader of the free world and be commander-in-chief of the most powerful country in the world? It just doesn't compute. And that's why this report has been so spectacularly embarrassing, excruciatingly so for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I have to say, his attempts to kind of show people how his mental acuity was on the ball and all the rest of it. I mean, I think it was awful. I mean, I've not been in politics for 1/20th of the time that Joe Biden has been in politics, but one of the first things I learned is when people are making accusations, you never repeat the charge. So for him to actually say, yeah, I am nice and I am an elderly man and my memory is so bad I let you speak. I mean, just don't have the clip which says I am all these things that you're saying that I am that I want to refute. I mean, it seemed like a really awful way of media managing this.
Well, yes. I mean, I think there was a certain amount of sympathy for him when he said, "How dare you speak about my son in that way?" But then, of course, Biden being Biden, he went and blew it because he then went on as well to confuse the president of Egypt, Al-Sisi, with leading Mexico. He started to talk about how he persuaded the president of Mexico to open the Gaza border on humanitarian grounds, at which point, no doubt, his aides just quietly wept behind the scenes because, of course, they've explained for years that Joe Biden is a gaffe machine, that he stammers, that he gets names wrong, but he gets the big picture right. But this kind of report is just so saying the quiet part out loud about what voters can see for themselves, that this guy is 81 years old. And if they elect him in November 2024, he'll be nearly 82 and he'll be 86 by the time he ends a second term in office. And yet he's clearly already fading and, needs some naps. And it really does raise the question of whether he's up to the job and who's really running the country. Perhaps he's got some, perhaps the aides are doing all the work in between his sort of, nodding off. It's so damaging. It's awful. Of course, Trump makes horrendous gaffes himself and spouts nonsense from noon to night. But people think he's deliberately spouting nonsense, almost
Yeah,
malicious. Telling
yeah, it's
fibs.
that whole difference between being Sleepy Joe, which was the accusation that was thrown at him in the last election campaign by Donald Trump, where he won and triumphed over Donald Trump. But in terms of when Trump goes off script or says things which are outrageous, that's what people assume that it is, that it's outrage, that it's for a reaction, not because he is also an elderly man who has had his mental acuity also questioned. I mean, it does say something about the so-called most powerful Western nation on earth that, in terms of the two tribes, political tribes there, these are the best two they can put forward in front of the country.
Well, Nikki Haley for the Republicans has been trying to make the point that she's still got her marbles and would be a safer bet than a 77-year-old Donald Trump and an 81-year-old Joe Biden. And guess what, Ruth? Nobody's listening. She
Doesn't have
had
the
her.
biggest microphone. Doesn't have the biggest microphone.
No, I mean, the Democrats are afraid to have anybody else but Joe Biden run against Donald Trump. He's still at least got that veneer that he beat him in 2020. So he's, the only person they think who can do it again. And Donald Trump has such a sort of balmy army of loyal MAGA fans that there's no shaking him either out of the Republican nomination for president. And yet, even though the country keeps saying we don't want a rematch between these two old bruisers, can't we have somebody new? Whenever somebody new pops their head up, they don't seem to be up to it. So
Yeah, I mean,
we
I
seem
have
to
to say,
be
there
on a
does seem to be
terrible
just a
course.
survival instinct, doesn't there, Sarah? Because I mean, I guess I wasn't alone in thinking that when the VP pick happened last time around, Kamala Harris, young, on the up, female, there was probably a potential for succession that was being written by the Democrats there. But as far as I could tell, she hasn't been given a whole lot to do as VP, and she hasn't done what she has been given that well. So she's kind of faded as a force.
I think she looked pretty exciting on inauguration day. She looked, new face of America, first African American, first Asian, first woman vice president, seemed to be making history. And then, let's face it, she blew it. She didn't really impress anybody on her own side, let alone the opposition. And she has been sort of coming back a bit. She's been doing quite well with the young on the abortion issue, on the guns issue. She's not making as many gaffes as she did, but nobody thinks she can beat Donald Trump in a head-to-head matchup, and nobody has the nerve to say to her, look, just stand aside either. And even if she did, who else is out there for the Democrats with the name recognition and the punch to take on Donald Trump? And
Well,
the only
Taylor
thing
Swift appears to be the question, doesn't it? Which seems outrageous, actually, that we're talking about that, but people actually are.
Oh, well, that's a great point. We're just coming up to the Swift Bowl this weekend,
Mm.
aka the Super Bowl, because I mean, Taylor Swift has done something remarkable, which is, united the sort of country music loving tribes with the young feminist tribes, Instagram generation, and the NFL, which is, National Football League, which is one of the most conservative institutions in America, by dating, a sort of bearded Kansas Chiefs hero from the American heartlands. So yeah, she would be great if she showed any sign of interest, which of course, she's got her billion-dollar songwriting and singing industry to run. So we better leave her to that. But the one thing I do think Democrats are counting on is they're hoping fervently that she'll bring her army of young Swifties out to vote. And the one thing that Democrats can say is that so far, in the midterms, in other elections, they've been outperforming their polling expectations, just because I think of distrust of the sort of MAGA extremists, as Biden calls them, but hardened opposition among half the country to Donald Trump.